Last year we did an episode, or last season we did an episode on the Murdaugh trial, specifically about the murder or the death of Mallory Beach. And we talked about this concept of privilege and social status and social rank, and how they seem to be willfully exchanged for truth and justice in South Carolina. And because, of course, we reside in South Carolina, this is a particular interest to us. So, Jessica, you've been following the Murdaugh trial. Why don't you bring listeners, viewers up to speed on where we're at right now?
Well, I'll try to give a very brief explanation of this story. It's kind of hard to do because there are so many pieces of it. But in 2019, Alec Murdaugh's son, Paul, was involved in a boat accident, allegedly driving the boat. It was their boat, the Murdaugh's boat. It was a river in Beaufort, and he had a boat piling. There were other people in the boat, and one of them was Mallory Beach, and she was ejected from the boat. She was killed in the accident. And so after this accident, a lot of things started coming out about this family, and it's been wild. So there was a housekeeper who mysteriously died after tripping over a dog. And subsequently, there was an insurance settlement. He filed a claim on his homeowner's insurance for an insurance settlement that was supposed to go to her kids, but he kept it. And then the Beach family filed a lawsuit. And then in June of 2021, he found his wife and son, Paul, murdered at their hunting lodge in Colleton County, which is about, I guess, halfway between like Charleston and Beaufort. And so this family has just been really powerful for generations, like generations of wealth and privilege and power. And so the whole investigation was kind of strange. And then in September, so that was June of 2021. And in September, there was this breaking news that Alec Murdaugh had been shot on the side of a back country road in the LowCountry. And the story was he had a flat tire. And so he was pulled over, and somebody stopped to help him, but they shot him. They shot him in the head. But it didn't kill him because they didn't do a very good job. And so later it comes out that he had staged this whole thing so that his surviving son, Buster, could collect on a $10 million life insurance policy, which we found out in the trial apparently didn't exist according to the testimony of Mark Tinsley. We're not really sure at this point. So it's just like lie upon lie upon lie upon lie, right? But it has been a very interesting trial because pretty much everything that he has said leading up to this about where he was, the events of the day, like his alibi, all the things have just been completely picked apart. And so it's very clear that like his lies don't stop at these other can you hear me okay? Sorry, I think my internet just cut out.
No, yeah, I can hear you. You said that his lies don't stop at these tragedies.
At those other instances, right? They are obviously present in this situation with his family as well, the death of his family, which was horrible. If anybody has been listening to the testimony from the witnesses. So, but after the roadside shooting, he was indicted on 19 financial crimes. There were, I think, 99 charges. He had embezzled money from his law firm. He's a lawyer, by the way. He had embezzled money from his law firm. He had stolen money from numerous clients where he had gotten settlements for them, and he had created like fake bank accounts, and he was sending money like to these accounts. He was getting attorneys to write him checks directly to go into these accounts. I mean, so many things. It's so bad. And so that came out. And then the following summer, so last summer, 2022, that's when he was charged with the murder of his wife and son because they discovered high velocity blood splatter on his shirt. And so now we're at this trial. So that's where we are. It's very interesting.
What's interesting to me is the people who are adjacent to this, right? So you mentioned he's got these accounts that he's funneling money into, and you put in the show notes about the high-powered attorneys.
Yeah. So his attorneys, Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin, are his main attorneys. And so Dick Harpootlian is actually a state senator. He's a Democrat in the Midlands. And he's been powerful for a really, really long time. He's got a lot of really powerful contacts nationally in the media. And so that has helped kind of skew, I think, the narrative in the national media. If you watch any of the coverage, it's pretty clear that they really want to be Team Murdaugh. But in the state of South Carolina, our circuits are put in place by our legislature. And so it's like a show. I think it's a show of power to have a senator defending you in this case. But the judge who's working on this case has been phenomenal. His name is Clifton Newman. And he has just been amazing. He has not let them get away with anything. And their nonsense and tomfoolery has just been shut down. It's been very interesting. And so it's been really cool because you have kind of those two completely different concepts of the corruption and trying to basically bully the system, right? But then you have this judge who's not afraid to stand up and say, look, this ends now. Like, this stops right now. We're not playing these games in my courtroom. And so it's been pretty interesting to talk about those things with our kids.
You mentioned the national media coverage, and I'm just honest with you, like, we're not watching any of it. And it's coming on our local news. Like, we're seeing sort of the updates on the local news.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's got this like inside edition kind of celebrity magazine kind of feel to it. And like, I'm just not interested, right? Like, I just am like, this is just a guy that needs to go to jail. Like, he just needs to go to jail. Like, clearly. And I mean, maybe I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt, or like innocent until proven guilty, but like, there's no doubt in my mind, this guy is totally guilty of this. Right. And so, so I'm kind of like not as engaged in it, maybe because I am somebody that's just already kind of made up my mind about it. So the value of going through the steps, going through the process, when you think about this due diligence, the innocent until proven guilty, like, there's two sides of this. Like, either it is that everybody deserves a right to a fair trial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's that this cannot be a fair trial because this person has so manipulated the system for so long that there's no such thing as a fair trial. So what do you like? What are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing?
Well, I think that he operated in a bubble down there in the LowCountry for the most part. You know, what he did in Hampton and Colleton and Beaufort, it didn't really impact us in Columbia and Greenville and Spartanburg. Like, we didn't really know much about it until the boat crash, because that was kind of the catalyst, I think, for all of this stuff to really come out. There was a local reporter named Mandy Matney, and she actually started covering it. I want to say she started covering it with the boat crash. It might have been a little before, but she is incredible, and she has put this thing together like from start to finish. And there's a link to her podcast in our show notes, but pretty much anybody who's watching this, who's familiar with this story, probably knows who she is, because they're probably already listening to her podcast. But I think that a lot of this was happening. It was happening in a bubble. So since it didn't really impact us, we didn't know much about it, right? But now that everybody's aware of it, everybody is at this point that we are seeing so much injustice every single day in the news. We're seeing it on social media, because now we have this amazing thing called cell phones that have connectivity to the internet, which is immediate connection to the whole entire world. And so I think now he can't operate in a bubble anymore because light has been shown on all of these dark corners of his life. And so I think that puts some pressure on the system to do what it's supposed to do and work the way it's supposed to work. So yes, I mean, everybody does deserve a fair trial. Absolutely. Everybody deserves a fair trial, but we also have to hold the system accountable to make sure that justice is delivered fairly. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we approach that conversation. But it is so hard when you have somebody like this who has done so many horrible things to so many people to say he deserves a trial, because you really just want to lock him up and throw away the key. I mean, really.
When you think about like just those financial charges, just the financial indictments, I mean, part of how this family has stayed in power is because they have these financial resources, but these are ill-gotten resources. This is stolen money.
Yeah.
This is not earned wealth, right? This is stolen wealth. And so then whatever influence he's been able to buy or whatever, favors he's been able to broker have all, come on the backs of these victims of these financial crimes too, right? So it just seems like there's this pattern of corruption and a pattern of privilege. So let me ask you this. When you think about the media coverage, because you mentioned like they seem to want to be Team Murdaugh, why? Why does the media coverage want to be on his side? Like, why do they want to believe that this guy is innocent?
I think it's Dick Harpootlian. I mean, he's kind of a big deal. I don't know why. I can't figure out why. And I mean, watching him work in this courtroom, I really don't know. I'm not sorry at all. I don't know why. Like, he's not that great. Yeah. But yeah, and I think that's it. And mainly because I've been watching it on Court TV. There are lots of outlets who are covering it. There are people who are covering it on YouTube. I think Fitz News has a feed, which I might actually check out. But like Court TV, their anchors or personalities or whatever, they're like judges and attorneys, and they have guests who are attorneys and police officers, detectives, pathologists, and all the things, right? And they come on and they talk about, this thing and that thing. And
are they focused on the procedure of this? Like they're helping us understand what's happening and what the procedures are?
Well, that's what yes and no. So that's what they present themselves as doing. But it's pretty clear that none of these people have educated themselves on South Carolina law. It is also very apparent that none of them have educated themselves on Southern culture. So it's very interesting. And for example, today there was this back and forth yesterday or this week. I think it has probably been for the last couple of days about whether or not they were going to allow testimony related to the roadside incident. And so the judge was like, it's not relevant. We can't let it in. The defense asked some questions that kind of opened the door a little, just cracked it. And the judge was like, not the right time. Can't, not right now. So then yesterday afternoon, they asked a question about, they went down, there was a line of questioning about the opioid abuse, which I didn't mention, but apparently it has also come to light. Not apparently, it has come to light that this man has an opioid addiction, and he says he has for 20 years or so. And so he was buying drugs, and that's where a lot of this money went, which the amount of money it is, we all know that there's no way he was spending that much money on drugs and he's still alive. There's just not. But so they went down this trail this line of questioning about the opioid use and the various different players that they thought, might be involved here. And they were alluding to the mafia in that area. I call it the mafia. It's like a gang, a drug gang. But they were kind of alluding to that they might have been responsible for the murders of Maggie and Paul. And it was really just to muddy those waters, right? Because you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is guilty, right? And so they're trying to find any way they can to make that doubt present for the jury. And so they went down this rabbit hole. And so the state says, all right, judge, like, they've introduced all of this. Now we have a right to explore this, right? Because they brought it up. We have a right to explore it. And the judge is like, yep. So here we are. And so anyway, what was your question? I forgot what your question was.
Well, it sounds
So
like
much.
my question was about the media. Coverage. And so when we think about, like, if this is a redirect towards, organized crime related to the drug trade, related to an opioid addiction, like, these are blames. Like, we're blaming other people. And it seems like there's this culture of shifting that blame instead of taking responsibility, instead of saying, like, this is a dude that's been stacking the deck in his own favor his whole life.
Well, this afternoon, this lady that's on in the afternoon, I can't remember her name, but she's a judge, or she was a sitting judge wherever she's from. I don't even know where she's from. But she has repeatedly said, like, with this roadside shooting, of course he's going to attempt suicide. He's just lost his wife and his son. He's devastated. He's in such distress. I'm sitting here, like, screaming at the TV, like, you idiot. He literally confessed to an investigator who just testified that he told him without reservation, with no uncertainty, that he did it because he wanted his son to collect life insurance policy. It wasn't distress. This man knew what he was doing. And with decades of fraud that he's committed, can you honestly sit there and tell me that he was going to have himself shot because he was in distress? Absolutely not. I don't think there is a selfless bone in this man's body.
Well, so I was going to say, like, when this first came to even our attention, right, was like on the roadside shooting incident, right? It was I know you have been following it through Mandy's blogs and podcasts, like, but again, like, it's not the kind of thing that I normally pay much attention to. And so it was when the roadside shooting happened that you're like, we've got to talk about this. And I was like, all right. It was clear from even just that story. I couldn't understand how this guy would even be willing to die for that life insurance policy. Like, even that story was like, dude, I don't believe you for a minute. I don't believe for a minute that you would sacrifice yourself for your younger son to inherit $10 million through life insurance. Like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
The only way this guy goes down is if somebody actually takes him down. I don't see himself as a self-sacrificial person. So even that roadside shooting scenario was like, if he had thought it through, maybe he's like, this is what I'm going to do because this is the only way to get out of this and leave, what is his name, Buster, unharmed by all these terrible things I've done, right?
Yeah.
But at the last minute, he must have chickened out because he didn't let the guy kill him. Like, he prevented it, right? So to me, like, there's just no evidence that this is a person that would do anything other than total corruption and absolute self-preservation.
Well, here is something also very strange. So during this trial, we have seen, so after the roadside shooting, Alec went so far as to sit down with a sketch artist. I can't remember, like, the official, what they call him. It's a sketch artist, and create a drawing of the person he claimed shot him. Now, the person who shot him, they call him Cousin Eddie. And it's this guy that he defended there was a workplace incident some time ago, and he represented him in this action. And apparently they're somehow related. I haven't quite nailed all of that down. But this is the man he hired, right? And he knew who he hired. He knew who he was looking at, right? So he sits down with a sketch artist. I mean, spends this time with these authorities, tax dollars, for this investigation. They finally showed the sketch of the person, and it is it bears very eerie resemblance to Anthony Cook, who was Mallory Beach's boyfriend, who was on the boat that night. So it's like, was he like in a like moment of panic? Was he going to try to pin this on Anthony Cook? Like, I mean, the saga just continues. So it's crazy.
Like, it's all like something out of a novel, which is why maybe that's the other part of it. Is I'm just waiting for Mandy to write her novel about the whole thing.
I mean, so it's pretty crazy.
So when we think about that media, the press coverage, because I want to get back to that question. So why are they on the side of the privileged elite? Why are they choosing that person's side? And you mentioned partly because Dick Harpootlian, but is it because it seems like this is somebody who has been in some way a leader or a pillar of the community? Like I got the impression that people in Beaufort do not like him. The Colleton County is fed up with this family. Yeah. Like from Mandy's reporting, it seems like everybody has been stepped on by this family for centuries and they're done. So they must be glad that this is happening. So why the media sympathy toward this guy?
Well, I mean, I think the media, it's all part of the same machine, right? The media, the legislative bodies, I mean, whether you're talking about your state legislative bodies or our national legislature, like it's all part of the same machine, and they're gonna look out for their own. I mean, and I don't want to say that in general because there are some really, really good reporters. We've had some really great reporters in South Carolina, but especially those national media outlets, they're always going to take, I feel like, the side of the powerful and the privileged. It just seems like that's how that cookie crumbles.
Do you think this is two things. Do you think this is the kind of story that makes a name for somebody like Mandy and creates a career for her, like in the same way that we see Woodward and Bernstein come out of, the Watergate conversation?
Absolutely.
And then the second piece of that is like, as the spotlight is being shown on South Carolina and this example of privilege and clear corruption, do you think that creates maybe a wave of journalistic investigations into these kinds of things? I mean, are we going to start seeing, I know there's like the Hunter Biden's laptop conversation.
Yeah.
There's the connections between Biden and China, Biden and Ukraine, like how the families are enriching themselves at every single level of power. They're enriching themselves through corruption. Yeah. Do you see that this is one of those maybe light the fuse kind of moments where we have a real opportunity here to start trying to dig deeper and understand, how deep that corruption really goes?
I hope so. I mean, I would certainly hope so. And I do want to say, so a couple parts of that question. So first part was whether or not this could, be a career maker. And absolutely it can. And Mandy has had numerous opportunities that have come out of her investigative reporting of this family specifically. But Mandy has done an incredible job of maintaining integrity in her reporting. And so the things that she says, she has made sure that they are backed up. She has proof. She's got all the evidence. She has fact checked everything more than once. So she's honest in her reporting, right?
So she's not just throwing around accusations trying to make a name for herself.
Exactly. She's trying to uncover the truth, and she's working now with a lady, Liz Farrell, who worked with her at Fitz News, is where she worked with her, and the two of them together. I mean, there's like crazy dream team, but there have been a lot of reporters who have kind of latched onto this story and tried to make it their own. A lot of people have pulled from her reporting and taken credit for it. And that's been really disappointing But we experienced that in the campaign, that lazy reporting, right? So we've seen it firsthand too. But in this particular story, that seems to be happening a lot as well. But it would be nice if the journalists who are really truly wanting to bring these things to light, if they did it on their own, if they found these pieces of the story that nobody else is reading, that maybe it's the story that's getting lost in between the chapters, and they brought it out to light.
Do you remember a few years ago when that movie Spotlight was up for Oscar? It was about the Boston Globe reporting the corruption in the Roman Catholic Church. And they were basically looking into this series of priests being accused of abusing children, and then those priests being moved around from parish to parish instead of being dismissed. And the corruption went all the way up to the Vatican. I mean, it went all the way up to the top. And so the Boston Globe, they were awarded a Pulitzer for their reporting on that, and they made the film Spotlight about it. And when we watched Spotlight, I was mostly impressed with how much risk there was to these individuals to chase down this very dangerous story. And certainly Mandy has been experiencing that personal risk as well, because when you take on the power in the place where you live, you're going to be under threat by that power, right? And so, there's just so much bravery, so much courage that it takes to be able to do that. And I'm wondering if she can't be, or if this wouldn't, what's the right way to put it? We need more of this.
Absolutely.
We need more people to be honest about what they're seeing and to be asking harder questions. And we're not getting that. I mean, my God, we're getting One America News, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I mean,
we need people to ask the questions, right? Yeah. When something comes up that just isn't quite right. I mean, when something's not right, and ask the questions, dig in, find out what the hell's going on. Because if you have a feeling something's not right, chances are something's not right. So
yeah. And if somebody's waving you off, telling you to look elsewhere, right? Or this isn't what you think it is, or like, don't pay attention to that, or we don't have room for that article here or there. So we're part of, you and I, even just with our podcast, are part of independent media. And independent media is making this huge surge right now, where we're seeing a lot of people that are out there doing, street reporting, and mostly what you and I are doing is commenting, right? Because we're thinking about how to talk to our kids about this kind of stuff, right? Like, how do you create a home environment that is honest in that way, and that pushes your kids to look past the headline and look into the story itself, and then pass the story itself to the sources that the story cites, right? And whether or not those are credible sources, and really trying to understand what they're consuming from a media perspective. And I think that's maybe the takeaway here, is like, how do you train your kids to recognize really solid journalism, and also to I don't know, to ignore that yellow journalism.
Yeah. And I think another common theme throughout this too, we're seeing now these people who aren't afraid to stand up and say, this stops now. Like, this family has had enough power for long enough. They've done enough damage. It's time now that we all stand up and say no more, right? Like, and I mean, the thing is, even if this jury finds him not guilty for these murders, and who knows what's going to happen. I mean, this case it's wild. I mean, it's like a carnival. He's still gonna do some time. I mean, 99 charges. So it's a lot. That's a lot. It's a lot. So
yeah, it seems unlikely he'll be cleared of all charges.
He won't be cleared of any of those financial charges.
Yeah. And so are they bringing forward those, the victims of those financial crimes? I mean, are we hearing from people who had hired him as an attorney but never saw their settlements? I mean,
we heard from Gloria Satterfield, one of Gloria Satterfield's sons.
She's the housekeeper, right?
She was the housekeeper. Yeah. So we heard from him. there have been like last week, I watched last week and this week, but before that it was kind of spotty how much I could keep up just because of work.
Yeah.
But like last week and this week, I've made a much bigger effort to like, I've kept it on in the background while I've been working and tried to keep up with what's going on, because I am very interested in how this turns out. As everybody in South Carolina, I think, should be, because this, you know, the way this case is handled is pretty important for us, given how much this family has been allowed to get away with for so long. But I think, well, I lost the question again.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, we're talking about how do you put it into context for your kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you talk to them about the media consumption piece? But then, of course, we talked about it the first time around when we talked about it. We were talking about power and privilege and not owning up to your own mistakes, and these lies that we're seeing. Alec Murdaugh tells these lies, and they just get deeper and deeper and broader and wider, and that dishonesty is a cultural thing for him. Like, that is it is just who he is. He's a dishonest person, and when people show you who they are, you believe them. Right? And so he's been dishonest all along.
Yeah. Yep.
Man. All right. Well, thank you.
You'll have to catch up. You'll have to.
No, I really don't want to. I really don't. I really don't. Like, here's the thing: is
we should have gotten Casey Crow on here with us, because he's been keeping up with it. I'm sure
he's all in. Yeah. And he'll want to talk about it on the radio now that we talked about it on Parody Porcupines. I don't disagree that this is important from a spotlight perspective, and exactly what I mean in terms of like the film spotlight, right? Like, I'm using that literally. When we see corruption like this, it is on media to expose it. And so thank you and kudos to Mandy for bringing this forward and just being after it to the place where people could not ignore it anymore. Like, they can't pretend this didn't happen. And we mentioned Mandy really being out there fighting for Mallory Beach and her family. And so I think that's just really, really valuable. So it's not that I don't want to pay attention for that perspective. It's that it's a little bit like the Johnny Depp trial, where I'm like, somebody else's business is somebody else's business. And like, I just don't have it in me to get all up in somebody else's business. And so I'm kind of on that side of it, where I'm like, I just want justice to be served. And I'm going to be interested to see, because you called out specifically this judge, and I'll be interested to see how this judge is able to maintain control of the courtroom and see that justice is delivered. That's Judge Clifton Newman that you mentioned from before.
He's been incredible. I've been so impressed with him. But just to point out too, though, like the importance of this, I look at it as a legal professional, right? We talk a lot as libertarians about criminal justice reform, judicial reform. And so I think this trial kind of, it has a lot to do with that, because of all the different pieces that are at play, the type of power this family had. They were attorneys, they were solicitors, they had sway in law enforcement agencies, they had sway in legislature. And so it's like they drove so many different things that tie into the changes that we need to make for our state and even nationally, but specifically for South Carolina. And so I think that's why I'm so interested in it, is because it's not like the Johnny Depp trial. Like, that was more, I think, for entertainment value for many people. But in this case, it's justice. And it's a bigger justice than just Mallory Beach. It's a bigger justice than just Stephen Smith, who we didn't even talk about. It's a bigger justice than the Satterfield family. There's a lot there. And so I think it will be a very important case in South Carolina for a number of reasons.
It's got that absolute power corrupts absolutely feel to it. And so don't mean to make light of it in any way, but I will trust you to keep me up to date on it. And
I will.
I just am going to do what I do best, which is bury myself in my romance novels. So, it's Better fiction, better than reality. All right, that's been Parenting Porcupines season 4, episode 4. So season 5, episode 4. Where's my banner? Bring that banner back. What did it say? Season 5, episode 4. A treatment of that. We missed you tonight, Melissa. Hopefully, we'll get her back next week and jump back into that libertarian politics stuff next week. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.